what is educating for freedom? And then what are the most significant challenges that you see us facing in higher education to meet that challenge?
Well, first of all, thank you to ACTA for not just for this event, but for everything that you do. It's those of us who are on the front lines of higher ed know that you always have our back, and that's tremendously, tremendously encouraging. Thank you to my panelists. Diana, what a wonderful way to frame this question. The tension between liberal education and civics education, and whether or not that tension is reconcilable. I mean, I think that's really a critically important question for us right now. A question about educating for freedom. You know, when you begin a new university, you get to start from scratch, and you get to think about the fundamental questions. So those of us who have been involved with the formation of the University of Austin over the past 3 years began with a very simple question, and that is, what is education and what is liberal education? How are those the same and how are they different? And one of the things that I have come to realize, but maybe not quite fully apprehend, is that education is either liberal or illiberal. It's either liberal or illiberal. Liberal education teaches you how to think. Illiberal education teaches you what to think. Now, this binary is not necessarily oppositional. There are times when illiberal education is appropriate. In fact, I think most of the time that young people spend in the K through 12 system, they're being educated in some sense illiberally. Right? What's the purpose of K through 12 education, primary and secondary? Well, the first thing that you do is you get students together and you give them the building blocks for knowledge. You teach them about numeracy and literacy and how to understand symbols. You give them the tools at hand. And then once they master those, you start to give them you help them fill in the picture of the world that they inhabit, of who they are, of our civilization, of society, of history. And we transmit this generally through things like textbooks and lectures where information has been consolidated and then passed on. And as students get older, the high school years, we start to plant the seed. There's a kind of transition where we start to tell them, look, we've given you lots of information, but you at some point aren't going to simply be a consumer of knowledge. You're going to be responsible to be a producer or discoverer of knowledge and truth. And what makes higher education, I think, higher, is that what we're asking students and professors to do at universities is exercise their highest capacity. And that is to be not simply knowers of the world, but discoverers of the world in pursuit of truth. Universities are places where knowledge is produced, discovered, transmitted, preserved. When a young person graduates from high school to go to college, what we're doing is we're now saying we are co-opting you into the process of discovery and creation of knowledge. You're going to learn how to be an intellectual discoverer. And some of those students will stay in higher education and continue to sort of spend their lifetime in this particular pursuit in different fields. We call these people professors. And other people will move out into the world, and the skill that they take with them, the ability to understand language and numbers and symbols and to recombine those things in creative and innovative and problem-solving ways, will help them become better citizens, will help them advance in essentially what we have now, a pervasive knowledge economy. So putting that frame around it for me, has been very helpful in thinking about starting a new university. The key in all of this, of course, is in liberal education, which is teaching someone not what to think, but how to think, is that very question of freedom. Universities can't be places where people learn how to exercise their freedom if they're not given the freedom to exercise their intelligence. That's why universities have to be committed to intellectual pluralism, to freedom of conscience, and to civil discourse. This is the proving ground for developing adults, developing citizens, to learn that not only do they have the opportunity to think freely, to ask questions, to try and learn, but with that opportunity comes responsibility. That as they pass in the world, they have to exercise their agency in a responsible way. And what is the linchpin there? The linchpin is a search for truth. Because ultimately, there is something called truth. It exists. I don't know why people find this scandalous. When we first announced 3 years ago we were building a new university dedicated to the fearless pursuit of truth, we almost melted down Twitter. All right, we were the #1 news story in the world on Twitter for 48 hours. And it basically, the general tenor of a lot of the commentary was, maniacs who believe in truth are trying to start a university. All right, there is something called truth. Now, our ability to access truth, that's a different question. All right, we are all flawed, broken, struggling human beings, but we need some directionality. We need to know what it is that we're aiming for. So universities, I think, our primary mission is to make sure that we understand as human beings that we have the capacity to come to know the world and know ourselves, and that we give ourselves direction, the North Star of truth, so we know where to aim. So it is the freedom to learn, the freedom to come to know, but that freedom isn't unbounded, it's directed towards what's higher, and that's why we call it higher education.